Hey everybody, thanks for joining me in this tutorial of Spark AR, where I will be showing you how to make your own face filters for Instagram and Facebook. I'm Jane Nguyen, manager at Futuris and community manager at Amoebis Labs. Let's get into this. Spark AR is a software by Facebook that allows creators, developers, and everyday people that are neither of those things to easily create customizable AR experiences across Instagram and Facebook. So when you first open Spark AR, you'll see this template screen, which shows you all the different kinds of filters that Spark AR is capable of creating for you. And you can kind of let this spark your imagination, your creativity when you're thinking about what kinds of filters to play around with. But today we're going to start with a new project. So open new project, and we're going to use face tracking for this. Give it a second to load. And here we are. So this is the workstation of Spark AR, and you can see that it's divided into a couple sections. There's the scene panel here on the left, the upper left, the assets panel on the bottom left, and then on the right side is the properties panel. Another thing that I want to show you is the camera. And so if you click here in the camera, you'll see that there's different kinds of faces out there that are showing different kinds of facial expressions that also have different kinds of hairstyles, and skin tones, and facial features that that you don't have yourself. And so it's good to test your filter using different kinds of faces so that you know that your filter would work in a different environment and with different people. And so this is a good uh, thing to play around with when you're in that testing mode. You could also click on the white square to open your own webcam. I'm going to open our default camera back with this man's face, and we're going to get started here. So a couple of things to know is how to move in our workspace. And so there are three ways that we can move. We can rotate, we can pan, and we can zoom. And so if you're like me and you're using a mouse with a scroll wheel, that basically means that you have three buttons on your mouse. You can also use keyboard shortcuts as well. So to rotate, you can hold down the right mouse button and move your mouse, and that's rotate. Or you can hold down Control on your keyboard and click the left mouse, or hold down the left mouse and then move. To pan, you can hold down the scroll wheel button or the middle button and move your mouse, and this is pan. Or you can hold down the Alt button and the left mouse button to pan as well. To zoom, you can hold Control, Alt, and hold down the left mouse button and move your mouse, and that's zooming in and out. And so let's orient our workstation so that it is at a good place that we want it to, so we have a good view of what we're working with here. So I think that's a good view right here. Another thing to learn is the directional light. So the directional light acts like the sun or a spotlight. You want to make sure that there's always a directional light in your scene to add depth to your digital art. You could always add more than one camera to make it brighter, but that is something that you always want to make sure of, is to add light to your project. So when I click on directional light, there are these three axes that show up, the X and Y axis and the Z axis. And when you're working in a 3D space, but in a 2D screen, it's kind of hard to orient a 3D model so that you can understand how it works in a 3D space. But this is the best way to arrange that. And so if you click on any of these arrows, it tells you that this directional light is moving along that plane or that axis or that dimension. And so if you move around your workspace, you can then move the cam or the directional light a little bit more of where you want it along the 3 axes, and you can also click on these the squares to move it along 2 axes. But play around with that and get that directional light in a good spot where you can uh, use it. And so I think it's good there. So to get started, we're going to make sure that we have at least one face tracker in our scene right now. So if you click on that, you'll see that there is a object around that's being tracked on this man's face. So if you don't see that, all you have to do is click on Add Object and click on Face Tracker and insert it. What we're going to do next is insert a face mesh. So if you, with Face Tracker selected, you're going to Add Object and select Face Mesh and insert. So you want to make sure that Face Mesh is a child of Face Tracker. That means that there is a hierarchical system when it comes to parent-child relationships in these kinds of platforms and working with 3D spaces. And so to make sure everything's organized and to make sure that everything is in this hierarchical order, make sure that whatever you're trying to associate with each other are in the respective parent-child relationship. So with that done, we're going to go down to the Assets panel and we're going to import our asset from our computer. So click on From Computer. We're going to click on the white mask that we have provided, and that's going to insert here as a texture. Now we're going to add a material. So we're going to click on Add Asset at the very bottom here and click on Material. We're going to add a material and rename it Carnival Mask. Okay, and with Carnival Mask selected in the Assets panel, we're going to move over to the Properties panel. And right here near the top, next to Texture, there's a drop-down button. You're going to click on that drop-down and select White Mask. Okay. And now we're going to go back to the Scene panel at the top left and select Face Mesh. And moving to the Properties panel on the right, we're going to go down to Materials. There's a plus sign all the way to the right of that. Click on right or click on the plus sign and then add Carnival Mask. And you can see that the Carnival Mask was added to our man's face. So if you want to test it on your own face, you could go to the Camera tab and click on the white square and turn on your own camera, and there you are. You could test it on your own face here. So I'm going to leave that on. And right now with the settings, as it is right now, we have just one face filter. But say that you want to add a friend, and that friend, you want to give them a different mask. You can do that by adding a different face tracker. So you've probably seen other filters out there where you could play with a friend. So we're going to do that here as well. So to get started on that, we're going to click on Face Tracker 0, and let's rename this Face Tracker 1 by right-clicking and renaming it Face Tracker 1. And also let's rename Face Mesh 1 just to simplify it, because it's kind of confusing when it's 0 but there is 1. That's just how my mind works. So Face Tracker 1 selected, we're going to right click and then duplicate. Okay, so now Face Tracker 2 appears as the duplicate, but Face Mesh 1 is still face mesh 1. So let's rename face mesh 1 to face mesh 2 under face tracker 2. Oh, whoops. I didn't mean to duplicate, but let's do face mesh 2. Okay. So now what we're going to do is add our second mask. And before we do that, I want to go into how you can import your own art and manipulate it so that it is fit for your face as you see here with this white mask. So I'm going to do that in Photoshop, and if you don't have Photoshop, that's okay. You could also manipulate art in Spark AR too if you import directly here. But to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to open up Photoshop, and on the website of Spark AR, under the Learn tab, there is something what they call a face reference asset. If you go to that article, which is featured on the Learn tab main page, you'll see that there are assets here that you could download right here that are a combination of meshes and textures that gives you a reference to how you can use your art so that when you import it into Spark AR, it is already located on the face where you want it. So if you can imagine, I'm going to open up this Face Feminine RPG, which is what they provided in that assets download. And with this open, this is basically a flat 2D image of a person's face. And if you were going to do something like a makeup filter and you want to add like different color eyeshadow and a different color lip color, you can use this as a reference on where the lips are, where the eyes are, so that you know you're applying your filter in the right spot. And so with that in mind, I'm going to import my mask by opening here and going into the mask that is pretty unfinished in my opinion. So I'm going to copy this blue mask and I'm going to paste this on top of this JPEG here. And with that, I'm going to position this where I want it to, right above the nose with the eyes showing, and I'm going to transform this a little bit by warping it. And I can play around a little bit with the shape and the length of it, for example. And let's make it a little bit symmetrical. Let's widen it a little bit. And get this little, let's move it up in the middle a little bit here. And I think that looks great. So I'm going to I'm going to delete the background. I don't need that face in the background anymore because, like I said, it's just a reference. So with that done, I'm going to only see my blue mask, which is what I want. And you could see that it is a lot bigger of a work, of a lot bigger of an image than the first time I imported it. And that will make it a lot easier for me when I import it into Spark AR and how it fits onto the face as a mesh. And so now I'm going to quickly export this as a JPEG. And I'm going to rename this blue mask 1. Okay. Now with that done, I'm going to go back to Spark AR and I'm going to import that blue mask that we just worked on here. So doing that, you go to Add Asset at the very bottom here under the Assets panel, and we're going to import from Computer. And you're going to find that blue mask that we just edited called Blue Mask 1. And we're also going to create a new material. So click on Add Asset again and add a new material. And let's call this Mardi Gras Mask. Okay. And so now back at the scene panel at the top left, we're going to select Face Mesh 2. And we're going to make sure that Face Mesh 2 is tracking your friend's face, which is going to be face 2 under the tracked face tab here. So make sure you click that drop down, select face 2, and let's do that for face tracker 2 as well, just while we're on that topic. So going back to face mesh 2, we're going to make sure that down at materials where it says carnival mask, we don't want carnival mask. We want the blue mask, right? So let's select the drop down and click Mardi Gras mask. And so right now with these settings as it is right now, I have the white mask on because I'm face 1 being tracked. And if I had a friend come in the camera, while I'm also still in the camera's going to track their face and a blue mask is going to appear on their face. And that's what I'm going to assume is going to work. And let's say I want that to happen. And so I'm good with how this project is set up right now. But I would like to be able to test that the blue mask is trackable on a person's face and that it looks really good. And so to do that, I'm going to show you how to do that. So if you, we're going to change the tracked face order, if you can imagine. So face tracker 1 and face mesh 1 is tracked to face 1 right now over here in the properties panel. So we're going to change that to face 2 for both the tracker and the face mesh. For Face Tracker 2 and Face Mesh 2, we're going to change that to Face 1 as the tracked face. Oh, another thing I forgot to do is to make sure that the Mardi Gras mask, it's giving me this gray face right now, which is a good indicator that there's something that's not quite right. So I figured it out right away because I forgot to add a texture to my Mardi Gras mask, which is the blue mask that I wanted, right? So clicking on materials in the Mardi Gras mask, you go over to the texture tab and click on blue mask 1 because that's the texture we want. And so as you can see, that automatically fixed my issue. I was able to add the blue mask to this to this face tracker here. And so that's how we know that that worked, how we wanted it to. So right now with the settings, if you can imagine that I'm face 1, and so I will have the blue mask on. If my friend came in on the camera as well, they would be, the camera would track their face and they would have the white mask on their face. And so that's how you create face filters with a friend. Another thing to consider once you're done playing around with these settings and tweaking it to how you like, you want to be able to test on your phone. And so going down to the bottom left here, there is a button called Test on Device. And if you click on that, it will prompt you on how to test on your device, which is basically downloading an app called Spark AR Player on Android and on iOS. And then connecting your phone to your computer via a USB cable and then following the prompts on the screen after that. But basically what you want to do when you're testing is to make sure that the camera is doing what you want it to do, just like in the Spark AR program. You want to make sure that the phone camera is able to track your face and then also bring up the filter in the correct position, in the correct colors, in everything that you wanted it to be as you were programming it here on Spark AR. And so it's always a very good thing and a good practice to always test your work in between and even after. So I'm always a good I'm always a big advocate for testing. So another thing, well, the next step that you want to consider after you've tested and tweaked with making your filter as perfect as you want it to be is to publish. And so that's the big step that everybody's looking forward to, right? So to do that, you click on this bottom left button here called Upload and Export. And this will pop up the project's details. And here it will give you a summary of your file and the size of it. And if it meets the requirements in size for Facebook and Instagram, which are different for each platform. As you can see, it's 10 megabytes for Facebook and 4 for Instagram. And so make sure you are able to meet those requirements, whatever platform that you're trying to put your filter on. Another thing to make sure of is to see that all your capabilities are being supported on whatever phone that you whatever phones are out there. And so right now we have face tracking and there's instructions on the screen. The instruction says to find a face, and you could choose to leave that in there or not. I'm going to leave it in there. And the only other capability that we have is face tracking. And so we're good with that. So the very last thing that you want to consider before you publish is to also submit an icon for your filter. Just like in the library that you see when you're browsing other filters, there's an icon that you click on to select your filter. And to go through the approval process for both Facebook and Instagram, you need that icon. And so don't forget to add that when you get done. And when you do all that, you're going to upload your project by clicking the upload button and then following the prompts after that. Publishing to Facebook and Instagram takes, it's not immediate. It takes a couple days depending on the backlog of requests and whatnot. The last I checked, it took between 1 to 3 days. And so make sure you plan ahead and plan that. And so this has been my tutorial for Spark AR and creating a face filter with yourself and with a friend. And I hope you enjoyed it and found it educational. And I look forward to seeing what you could do out there with Spark AR in ways that you've probably never really imagined before. There's lots of ways that you could play around with this. There's lots of documentation and videos and tutorials that you can learn from. And so I'm just a small bunch of them. And I look forward to seeing what is out there in terms of all the content, AR filters. And so thanks for watching. I'm Jane Wynn. Take care.